You're scrolling through your feed when a headline stops you cold. It sounds explosive. It sounds final. It sounds like everything people have whispered for years has suddenly been confirmed. Pastor Creflo Dollar finally arrested after 30 years of lies. Your first reaction is shock. Your second is confusion. And your third is the most important one of all. What is actually true here? And what has been twisted into something far more dramatic than reality? Because the real story of Creflo Dollar is not a simple tale of good versus evil or faith versus fraud. It is a complicated, emotional, and deeply human story about power, belief, trust, ambition, and the uncomfortable space where religion and money collide. And when you strip away the exaggeration and the clickbait, what you're left with is far more unsettling than any viral headline. For decades, Creflo Dollar's voice filled television screens in millions of homes around the world. He wasn't just preaching sermons, he was shaping how people understood God, success, failure, and even themselves. His message was clear and confident. God didn't want his people barely surviving. God wanted them thriving, prosperous, healthy, and victorious right now, not just someday in heaven. To struggling families living paycheck to paycheck, that message didn't sound like greed. It sounded like hope. What made Creflo Dollar different from many other preachers was not just what he said, but how certain he sounded when he said it. He didn't present faith as a possibility. He presented it as a guarantee. Follow the principles. Speak the right words, give faithfully, and your life would change. For millions, that certainty was magnetic. They trusted him because he looked like living proof of his own message. But while audiences grew and donations poured in, very few people asked hard questions. They didn't ask how the ministry was growing so fast. They didn't ask where all the money was going. They didn't ask how a pastor came to live a lifestyle that looked more like a corporate tycoon than a church leader. At the time, none of that seemed to matter. Faith was loud, doubt was quiet, and Creflo Dollar's image remained polished and powerful. What many people forget is that long before the mansions, the luxury cars, and the global empire, Creflo Dollar was just a young man in Georgia with very different dreams. He didn't originally plan to become a preacher. He wanted to play football. That dream ended abruptly after a serious injury. During recovery, he claimed to feel a calling from God that changed the direction of his life. He earned a degree in education, worked as a therapist, and began leading small Bible studies with friends. In 1986, those Bible studies turned into a church service attended by just 8 people sitting on folding chairs in a school cafeteria. It was humble. It was simple. And no one in that room could have imagined what it would become. Over time, the church grew at an astonishing pace. Crowds multiplied, television cameras arrived, books sold, world changers. Church International became a global force reaching far beyond the United States. As the ministry grew, so did the message. What started as encouragement slowly became instruction, then expectation. Faith was no longer just about salvation or personal growth. It became about outcomes. Speak it, and it will happen. Give, and God will multiply it back to you. Wealth was no longer viewed as neutral. It was preached as evidence of obedience and divine favor. This is where the story begins to turn. Giving money stopped being simple generosity and became spiritual obligation. Tithing was preached as mandatory, not optional. If you weren't prospering, the implication was clear. Something was wrong with your faith. Some people gave joyfully. Others gave fearfully. Many gave even when they couldn't afford it, believing they were unlocking God's blessings. Critics warned that this teaching was dangerous, that it turned faith into a transaction and God into a vending machine. But the criticism didn't slow Creflo Dollar down. His influence expanded. His lifestyle became more visible. Luxury homes, expensive cars, designer clothes, and first-class travel were no longer rumors. They were facts, and he never apologized for them. He said poverty was not holy. He said believers were meant to live better lives. The tension exploded into public view when he launched a fundraising campaign for a private jet, reportedly costing tens of millions of dollars. He told followers the jet was necessary to spread the gospel efficiently. The backlash was immediate and intense. News outlets, social media, comedians, and even fellow pastors questioned how a man of God could justify such extreme luxury. Memes flooded the internet. Trust began to crack. Over the years, questions about transparency followed him everywhere. Unlike many ministries, his organization did not publicly release detailed financial records. In 2007, when a U.S. Senate inquiry examined the finances of several televangelists, Creflo Dollar refused to cooperate, stating that the government had no authority over church finances. No criminal charges ever came from that inquiry, but suspicion never fully disappeared. Then came a moment that shook even his most loyal supporters. In 2022, Creflo Dollar stood before his congregation and did something almost unimaginable. He publicly renounced decades of his own teaching on tithing. He admitted he had been wrong. He told members to throw away books and sermons he had written on the subject, acknowledging that giving should come from the heart, not fear or obligation. For some, it felt like growth and humility. For others, it felt like betrayal. People who had sacrificed for years wondered what it all meant now. But the most damaging moment to his public image came years earlier in 2012 when he was arrested following a domestic dispute involving his teenage daughter. The incident sent shockwaves through the faith community. The man who preached discipline, self control, and peace was suddenly facing assault charges. Though the charges were later dropped after he completed court mandated counseling, the stain on his reputation remained. It wasn't just about legality, it was about trust. From that point on, every mansion, every luxury car, every sermon about prosperity was viewed through a different lens. Some still saw him as a visionary preacher boldly teaching faith. Others saw him as a symbol of excess, secrecy, and spiritual manipulation. And Creflo Dollar never fully stepped away from either image. He defended his lifestyle as evidence of God's blessing and continued preaching to millions. Today, the story of Creflo Dollar is not about a dramatic downfall or a final arrest. It is about unanswered questions. It is about the power one voice can have over millions of people and the responsibility that comes with that influence. Some followers were inspired and empowered, others were financially and emotionally wounded. Both experiences exist at the same time. In the end, this story forces a difficult reflection. Where is the line between inspiration and exploitation? Between faith and business? Between belief and control? The empire Creflo Dollar built changed lives for better and for worse, and perhaps the most haunting question of all remains unanswered. Was it an empire built on faith or built on the faith of others? That answer is not found in headlines, court documents, or sermons. It's something every listener, believer, and observer must decide for themselves.